It's time again for another episode of Healthy Thriving Family After Divorce. Stephanie Dobson is here. Stephanie is a collaborative lawyer, mediator, and educator with offices through Hankin Divorce Law and Mediation in Lloydminster and Edmonton. So, Stephanie, we're going to continue our conversation from last week. But first of all, thank you for joining us.
Thanks again for having me, Stacey.
Okay, so for those who didn't know, we've been talking about employment pension plans. So let's just do a little bit of a wrap from what we did last week to kind of freshen up the viewers who may not have seen that episode.
Sure. So there's two different kinds of employment pensions that we covered last week. So what we're not talking about yet, which we're going to cover in a future episode, is Canada Pension Plan. So we're actually talking about employment pensions, which there's two kinds. So the first one is called Defined Benefit Pension Plan, and this is the formula-based pension plan that we talked about last time. And then there's the Defined Contribution Pension Plan, which is more like an RRSP, where there's contributions made by a person during their employment and then interest earned. So we talked about how to value those pensions and how much more complex it is to value the defined benefit formula-based pension plan, and the importance of getting what's called a pension value estimate straight from the pension administrator.
Okay, and once they have received that, what's the next step, Stephanie?
So when you receive that, there's different names for this document that you get from the pension administrator, but basically a statement of pension division on breakdown of relationship. There will actually be a value on the form when you receive it. So it might be called total entitlement, or it might be commuted value, or a variety of other wording. But basically, the number on the form is not necessarily an exact value of the pension. It's the pension administrator's estimate based on their own set of criteria and assumptions. So it's meant to just be that, just an assumption. Has nothing to do with the individual member's circumstances. So I highly recommend, when there's that defined benefit formula-based pension plan, that they get a pension actuary involved in providing an opinion on the actual value of the pension based on the member's circumstances. And that's the most reliable way to determine the pension value when we're talking about that formula-based defined benefit pension plan.
Are there any restrictions when you are dividing this up between the spouses?
Well, there's a couple of restrictions that former couples will want to consider. So the first one is the maximum transfer amount that can be transferred from one spouse to another under the applicable legislation. And the second is the way that the pension division can occur. So let's first talk about that maximum transfer issue. So for a defined contribution pension plan, that's the simple one, the one like an RSP. Typically, there's any amount that can be transferred from the member to the spouse. Now, for a defined benefit pension, that's the formula one, it will depend on the legislation under which the member's pension is regulated. So it's anywhere from 50% to 100% that's allowed to be transferred to that member's spouse. So the second limitation may now be how the actual transfer itself occurs. So for the simple defined contribution RRSP type pension plan, typically the spouse receiving the funds will receive a lump sum, which will then be deposited into what's called a LIRA, a locked-in retirement account. And that's a locked-in account that cannot be accessed until certain circumstances apply to that spouse. For a defined benefit pension, that's the formula-based one, it will depend on the pension rules as to how the recipient spouse can receive the funds. So some pensions will allow the member's former spouse to choose between either a lump sum or becoming what's called a limited member of the pension plan, which means that you would actually receive monthly payment from that pension plan directly once the retirement time occurs. So other pensions will have limitations on what might be available. So of course, there's so much involved in pension plan valuations and division. The best thing to do is to get advice as to your specific pension plan and just make sure that you're getting the right information right from the start.
All right, Stephanie. Well, thank you so much for digging into that, because there is a lot involved, and obviously pensions are super important to people. So if anybody is looking for more information or to speak with you and dig a little bit deeper, what's the best way to find you, Stephanie?
Sure. So the best way to first look at our services and see if our office might be right for your situation, or to get more information, is to look on our website at Henka Divorce, HENKA divorce.ca. And there's a huge resource section. There's a huge blog section. There's also all of our TV interviews. All of our episodes are also on our website as well. So that's a great first starter for information. You can also, of course, call our office 780-875-2234.
All right, Stephanie. Well, thank you so much for joining me once again, and we'll be back to chat with you next week.
Yeah, thanks, Stacy.